Hey guys, tonight we are slipping quietly into the marble heart of ancient Rome. No sword fights, no gladiators, no wild banquets dripping in garum sauce. Just you, a broom, and 10,000 dusty scrolls that all claim to be very important. You're the librarian of the Athenaeum, the empire's most dignified warehouse of words, and you're about to spend an entire day trying not to lose your mind or your parchment. You probably won't survive this, at least not without a sneeze attack. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise before dawn. The city is still half asleep, the alleys slick with last night's mist, and the only sounds are the distant bray of donkeys and the metallic clank of a baker's shutters. You pull your cloak tighter, its edges stiff with old ink stains, and make your way toward the Athenaeum, Rome's temple of learning. It's not a temple in the divine sense, though there are statues of Minerva scattered about, watching over the shelves like judgmental owls. Inside, the air is cool and faintly sweet, like beeswax and ancient glue. You light an oil lamp with a practiced flick and pause before the rows of scrolls. They stretch higher than your reach, each cylinder labeled in fading red ink, some cracked with age. You take a deep breath. This is your kingdom of silence, and the day's first task awaits, sweeping the mosaic floor before the senators arrive to pretend they're intellectuals. Your broom scrapes softly across tiny tesserae stones, ivory, lapis, green glass, forming the image of Minerva holding a stylus. You mutter, "Good morning, goddess," because you've found it wise to keep her on your side. The dust rises like incense, turning golden in the slanting sunrise that sneaks through the colonnade. For a moment, you can almost believe the light itself is learning. Historians still argue whether the Athenaeum was strictly public or reserved for Rome's elite. But for you, it doesn't matter. You serve anyone who enters, from toga-wrapped senators to half-drunk poets seeking inspiration, or, more accurately, shelter from their creditors. By the time the first scholar arrives, you've already rearranged a dozen scrolls, relit 3 lamps, and said a silent prayer that nobody asks for anything written in Etruscan. The old scholar, Lucius, who smells faintly of myrrh and arrogance, nods at you as though he owns the place. "The treatise on wind currents," he grunts. You hand it over without a word. He'll return it in a month, probably with crumbs lodged in the seam. A pair of young students follow soon after, whispering about a rumored new philosophy from Greece. Something about atoms, or was it infinity? You smile politely but can't resist a mental joke. Infinity? Try counting these scrolls, kids. Your fingers trace papyrus edges as you check for damage. The scrolls are delicate things, papyrus sheets glued and rolled around wooden dowels, each one a small miracle of survival. You know their quirks, which authors loved long-winded metaphors, which scribes used too much ink. There's even a copy of Virgil's Aeneid with a doodle of a cat chasing a rat in the margin. You found it years ago and decided not to erase it. Some history deserves to misbehave. Every morning has a rhythm: dust, sort, breathe, repeat. Occasionally, you pause to listen to the distant murmur of the forum, like waves of argument crashing against marble. Outside, the empire hums with business and conquest. Inside, you catalogue words that might outlast them all. The Athenaeum isn't grand by imperial standards, no gold ceilings or fountains, but its beauty lies in restraint. Shelves of polished cedar line the walls, tablets of bronze bear the catalogue numbers, busts of philosophers stare eternally unimpressed. You sometimes wonder if they'd approve of how often you use those busts to hang your cloak. By mid-morning, the sun pours in full through the high windows. You stop sweeping and rub your back, feeling every hour of quiet service. There's a charm in this monotony, the predictable rustle of parchment, the earthy smell of ink. You once dreamed of travel, Egypt, maybe, where papyrus grows wild and librarians are said to wear white linen. But Rome needs you, or at least your ability to find lost scrolls faster than a senator loses his temper. Still, even the quiet life has its dramas. Just last week, someone accidentally mixed up the works of Pliny and Plautus, which resulted in a senator quoting a comedic line about drunken goats during a serious debate on law reform. You're still chuckling about it. You pause now, broom in hand, watching a shaft of dust swirl upward like a tiny galaxy. You think about how knowledge, too, floats, particles drifting from mind to mind, impossible to catch completely. That's the secret, isn't it? You can preserve words, but never the full breath behind them. Your stomach growls. Breakfast will have to wait until the next section of your day, when you'll unroll the register and count new arrivals. Fresh papyrus from Alexandria, maybe even a Greek play or two. But for now, you finish sweeping and lean against the marble column nearest the window. The city is awake at last, carts rumbling, pigeons plotting mischief on the roof. You smile faintly, brushing the last bit of dust into your pan. Somewhere, far across the city, an emperor might be plotting another war. But here, in your quiet corner of Rome, your only battle is against mildew. And for tonight, that feels just heroic enough. By the time sunlight fully floods the marble floor, you've already rolled up your sleeves for the day's most mind-numbing ritual, the scroll census. It's as thrilling as it sounds, checking, counting, and reciting the endless titles of works you've already handled 1,000 times. You mutter them under your breath like a sleepy incantation. Cicero, on duties. Ovid, Metamorphoses. Some guy named Quintus, on the proper care of goats. You pause on that last one, sighing. How does that even end up here? The cataloguing table sits beneath a fresco of Minerva, whose painted eyes seem to follow your every movement. You suspect she's silently judging your handwriting. Historians still argue whether librarians in Rome worked with official imperial registries or made up their own systems as they went. Judging by the chaotic state of your scroll racks, you're pretty sure it's the latter. You take your stylus and wax tablet, dip your reed pen in ink, and begin noting the titles of newly arrived scrolls. Each one smells faintly of Nile mud and salt, the signature scent of papyrus imported from Egypt. The rolls arrive bundled with cords, labelled in shorthand Latin, often smeared by sweaty couriers who've hauled them through crowded streets. You untie them carefully, whispering small apologies to the fragile fibres, then test each for mould by holding it to the light. The right colour is pale honey. Anything darker goes straight to the repair shelf. Don't sneeze. You remind yourself as a puff of dust floats up. The Roman Empire conquered half the known world, but it has yet to conquer proper ventilation. The young apprentices file in, rubbing sleep from their eyes. They're all elbow and enthusiasm, eager to impress. You assign them simple duties, fetching boxes of reed pens, wiping the busts of philosophers, rearranging the letters shelf by shelf. Remember, you warn them, Cato before Catullus. Always. They nod solemnly as if you've just revealed the meaning of life. Your assistant, a lanky fellow named Decimus, leans over your table. Sir, should I file these under natural philosophy or superstition? He holds up a scroll labelled on talking snakes and other wonders. You look at him, deadpan. Let's call it early zoology. He grins. As you wish. The hours slide by with the rhythm of shuffling parchment. Outside, the noise of the forum drifts through the windows. Vendors shouting, donkeys braying, someone reciting bad poetry for coins. Inside, you're lost in the serene absurdity of order. Every scroll you touch feels like a heartbeat from the past. Somewhere, centuries ago, a scribe bent over this very papyrus, squinting by lamplight, dipping his brush into ink mixed from soot and wine. Maybe he cursed the same way you do when the letters blur. Now and then, a student approaches, desperate for guidance. Do you have Aristotle's on the soul? One asks breathlessly. You hand it over, but not before raising an eyebrow. Be gentle, you warn. He bites. The student laughs nervously, clearly unsure if you're joking. You are, mostly. Your hand cramps around the stylus. You stretch your fingers, flexing them until they pop. Cataloguing might not be glamorous, but it's the backbone of civilization, or so you tell yourself whenever the monotony threatens to swallow you whole. After all, the Roman Empire might crumble one day, not that you'd say that too loudly, but your neatly recorded inventory will live on in some dusty vault, confusing future historians. A courier bursts in mid-morning, sweating through his tunic. Delivery from Alexandria, he wheezes, dropping a crate at your feet. The apprentices crowd around as you pry it open. Inside lie papyrus rolls tied with red cords and sealed with wax bearing the emblem of Serapis, the Egyptian god of knowledge. You smile. New arrivals mean fresh mysteries. Among the shipment is a particularly fine scroll, its edges painted blue. The title reads, On the Stars and Their Music. You unroll a few lines, intrigued. The author, an astronomer from Rhodes, claims the planets hum as they move, each a note in the divine harmony. It's beautiful nonsense, and you can't help murmuring, you'd get along well with the poets. Still, you jot the title carefully, Even nonsense deserves a place on the shelf. There's another scroll, unlabeled, with faint traces of Greek script. You frown, holding it closer to the light. The letters shimmer faintly, uneven, as if written by someone with trembling hands. You recognize fragments, a hymn to Apollo, perhaps, or a lost play. You mark it for translation later, secretly excited. Most days blur together, but every so often, history throws you a puzzle, a whisper from the edge of memory. Decimus interrupts your reverie. "Sir, what should I do with the broken seal on this one?" he asks, holding up a damaged scroll. You glance at it and shrug. Glue it, roll it tight, pretend it never happened. That's the Roman way. He laughs, jotting it down in the register. You appreciate his sense of humor, rare in this job, where mistakes are measured in centuries. As noon approaches, you close your tablet and stretch, joints creaking like the hinges of an old door. You've recorded 78 titles since sunrise. Some are copies of classics, some mundane legal codes, and a few, like on Talking Snakes, pure nonsense. You run your thumb along the smooth wax, feeling the faint heat from where the stylus pressed. Every mark is temporary. You'll scrape it clean tomorrow and start again. The Athenaeum quiets for a moment, a rare lull between deliveries. You hear the faint echo of sandals on marble and the flutter of pigeons nesting in the rafters. Dust dances in a golden beam of sunlight, moving like tiny spirits. You rest your elbows on the table and exhale. Some say knowledge is power. You've always thought it's more like sand. It slips through fingers, yet somehow shapes empires. You may never hold it all, but you can at least keep count. Your stomach growls again. Time for your midday ritual, a break, Roman style. But first, one last look at your neatly stacked scrolls, standing in perfect, fragile rows. You smile, almost proud. Then you sneeze. Hard. A cloud of dust rises like divine punishment. Decimus snickers from across the room. "Bless you," he says. "Thank Minerva," you reply. She's probably laughing too. You retreat from the scroll racks, rubbing your temples as if knowledge itself has been leaking through your skull. The next task on your invisible checklist waits in the corner. Your favorite, though you'd never admit it aloud, making ink. The ink room is small, tucked behind a tapestry depicting Minerva triumphing over ignorance, a scene you privately call My Mondays. Inside, the air smells of vinegar, resin, and something faintly sweet, like burnt honey. On the work table rest your sacred tools, a mortar and pestle, a bundle of dried reeds, jars of soot, gum arabic, and the faint hope that no one barges in demanding Cicero again. You roll up your sleeves. "Time to get messy," you mutter. Historians still argue whether Roman ink was a trade secret or common household craft, but for you, it's practically alchemy. You scoop a measure of soot, collected from yesterday's lamp wicks, and grind it with gum arabic and water until it turns glossy black. Add a few drops of wine, not for taste but for smoothness. The recipe was passed down through generations of librarians, each adding their own twist. Yours. A pinch of salt to keep the mixture from molding. Like the soup of knowledge, you joke to yourself, stirring slowly. The thick, dark ink gleams in the light, viscous and almost alive. It's strange to think that every decree, poem, or scandalous letter in Rome starts right here, from this bubbling concoction of soot and spit. As you work, Decimus pokes his head through the curtain. "The philosophers are arguing again," he sighs. You don't even look up. Over what this time? Whether virtue can exist without pain. You snort. Tell them to try grinding soot for an hour. They'll have their answer. He laughs and disappears, leaving you alone with the rhythmic scrape of pestle on stone. The sound is oddly calming, like rain against a window. You've often thought ink making is a meditation of sorts. Each swirl erases the noise of the outside world. When the mixture reaches the right texture, thick enough to cling to the reed pen but fluid enough to flow, you pour it carefully into a small clay jar. Then you test it, dip your pen, drag a slow line across a scrap of papyrus. Perfect. The black glistens, then settles into matte calm. You watch it dry, mesmerized by how something so simple, carbon and water, can hold entire civilizations together. "Beautiful, isn't it?" says a voice behind you. You turn to find Marcia, one of the copyists, leaning in the doorway. She's smirking, holding a scroll that looks like it survived a minor war. Beautiful, you agree, until someone spills it on the archives again. She rolls her eyes. That was one time. One time this week, You correct her, smiling. She laughs, stepping inside. You ever think about how this is what keeps Rome alive? Not armies, not emperors, just ink. You nod. Ink and librarians. The empire's true conquerors. The two of you share a moment of mock solemn silence before she heads back to the scriptorium, leaving you with your freshly made batch and a faint trace of amusement. You clean your tools meticulously. A good librarian respects their instruments the way soldiers respect their swords. Once, years ago, a careless apprentice forgot to wash the pestle, and the next day's ink came out green. For weeks, the margins of official decrees looked like someone had dipped them in swamp water. The prefect was not amused. You reach for your reeds next. Each one must be trimmed at just the right angle. Too sharp, and the papyrus tears. Too dull, and the words smear. You pull out your tiny bronze knife and begin shaving them one by one, the faint hiss of reed against metal joining the hum of cicadas outside. This, too, is a small ritual of peace. You can't help but think of the poets whose verses you copy, how they chase immortality through rhyme, while you chase legibility. Some days, you wonder who will last longer, the poets or their ink. A soft breeze drifts through the lattice window, carrying the scent of baking bread from a nearby street. Your stomach growls again, but you ignore it. Instead, you take a moment to look around the cramped room. Every wall bears the scars of years, splashes of pigment, candle soot, faint handprints in the plaster. It's not grand like the reading halls, but this is where knowledge takes physical form, drop by drop. You find an old amphora tucked behind the shelves, half filled with dried ink. The surface is cracked into thin black veins, like a map of forgotten roads. You scrape off a flake with your knife and hold it up to the light. Hard as stone. In some strange way, this is history too. Failed batches, ruined pens, the invisible labor behind genius. Another courier appears at the doorway, panting. Message from the prefect, he gasps, holding out a tablet. You wipe your hands on your tunic and read it quickly. A short notice. Inspection scheduled this week. Ensure orderliness of supplies and inventory. You groan. Perfect timing. The courier blinks. Should I? Tell the prefect we are ready, you say. Then, under your breath, and pray to every god that he doesn't notice the fig glue experiment. When he leaves, you lean back against the wall, staring at your neatly aligned jars. Ink, reeds, glue, papyrus, mundane things, but together they make memory permanent. Or as permanent as anything can be in Rome, where one good fire can erase centuries. Outside, the afternoon sun blazes across terracotta roofs. You pour a few drops of leftover ink into a small bowl, dipping your finger to draw a lazy spiral on the table. It looks like the letter O, the start of a word you'll never finish. You smile to yourself. The philosophers can debate virtue all they want. You've found yours right here, in patience, in craft, in the quiet dignity of doing something small, perfectly. The ink jars cool quietly on the shelf as you step back into the main hall, where chaos is already brewing, a predictable academic sort of chaos, polite on the surface but vicious beneath. The scholars' parade has begun. It happens every afternoon, right after lunch, when the city's thinkers, or at least those who think they think, descend upon the Athenaeum. Stoic philosophers in rumpled wool cloaks, poets with more perfume than sense, senators pretending to be cultured, each one convinced their work alone will redeem Roman civilization. You adjust your belt and sigh. Time to referee another intellectual circus. They arrive in clusters. First, the Stoics, droning on about the virtue of moderation while elbowing each other for the best seats near the light. Then the Epicureans, declaring that knowledge must serve pleasure, usually while smuggling figs in their sleeves. And finally, the poets, self-appointed prophets of beauty, trailing the faint scent of anxiety and bad wine. You stand by the entrance desk like a weary host at a dinner party that's lasted a decade. A senator named Marcus Julius strides in, toga sweeping dramatically. "Ah, my favorite librarian," he booms, though he never remembers your name. "Do you still have that commentary on the Republic?" You raise an eyebrow. "Still? It's been 5 years, Senator." He waves dismissively. Yes, yes, ideas ripen slowly. You hand him the scroll, already predicting he'll return it unread. He always does. Behind him comes Flavia, a poetess whose verses about moonlight and sorrow have made her the darling of Rome's salons. "Do you have parchment smooth enough to write heartbreak on?" she asks. "Depends," you reply. "How tragic are we talking?" She grins, unfazed. Tragic enough to sell. You chuckle and hand her a narrow roll of fine papyrus. Use the thin side, you say. Tears absorb better. She laughs, blowing you a kiss as she drifts away toward the copyist's corner. Historians still argue whether the Athenaeum was more library or social club. From your vantage point, it's definitely both. On good days, knowledge hums through the air like a lyre string. On bad days, it's mostly gossip, ego, and too many sandals squeaking on marble. At the center table, two philosophers are already at it, an old Stoic named Cassius and a young Epicurean called Gaius. You can tell from the tone that they've circled this argument 100 times. I say, Cassius intones, the wise man feels neither joy nor sorrow. Gaius scoffs. Then he's not a man, he's a stone. You pass by them, pretending to tidy a pile of scrolls, half listening as their voices rise. It's like watching two statues insult each other. You make a mental note to move the ink jars farther away. Last week they nearly came to blows over metaphysics and splattered half a shelf. You hear another familiar voice from the back, Horatius, the historian, who's never satisfied with a fact unless he can argue against it. No, no, he declares, waving his stylus dramatically. The fire of 48 BC destroyed the original Alexandrian library, not 47. I'd stake my reputation on it. You can't resist. You mean what's left of your reputation? He laughs, tipping his wax tablet toward you. Ah, but without controversy, my dear friend, you'd have nothing to catalogue. He's not wrong. The noise grows into a kind of intellectual thunderstorm, debate, laughter, occasional outrage. You move among them, replacing oil lamps, offering fresh ink, occasionally reminding them that papyrus is not for wiping wine spills. The scent of old parchment mingles with the faint spice of sandalwood and sweat. Somewhere in this whirl of voices, you catch fragments of brilliance, a poet's new metaphor for the sea, a philosopher's insight about virtue, a student's nervous question that sparks genuine curiosity. It's messy, human, alive. And you, invisible amid it all, are the keeper of the current, making sure it flows. There's a certain pleasure in the anonymity. You don't need applause. You just enjoy watching ideas collide, spark, and sometimes fizzle like damp fireworks. Still, the parade has its hazards. One of the poets, drunk on inspiration or actual wine, probably both, starts reciting aloud from a freshly copied verse about Jupiter's love life, loudly, graphically, and right as a senator's wife passes through the door. You wince. Censor it, she shrieks. You raise both hands. Madam, the poet outruns my red ink. She storms off, muttering about moral decay, and you mark another tally in your mental notebook. Scandal of the Week, Volume 38. Eventually, the room settles into a gentle hum again. The Stoics have retreated to the windows, the Epicureans to the snack table, and the poets to dramatic sighing. You take a deep breath and walk to the back balcony. From there, you can see the rooftops of Rome, tiles glowing in the late afternoon sun, smoke curling from bakeries, distant shouts from the Forum. The Tiber glimmers like a ribbon of bronze. You lean on the railing, letting the air cool your skin. Sometimes, you think, this is what knowledge truly is. Not quiet contemplation, but noise, laughter, debate, the clash of opinion echoing through marble halls. You may not agree with them, but you love the sound of their living minds. A young student passes by, clutching a scroll to his chest. Sir, he says timidly, I think I understand Aristotle now. You smile gently. Give it a few hours. That feeling fades. He laughs nervously, but you see the spark in his eyes. You remember that feeling, the first time words opened the world to you. Maybe that's why you stay here. Not for fame or coin, but for these tiny, fleeting moments when learning feels like light breaking through dust. The shadows lengthen across the floor, and the parade begins to disperse. The scholars drift out in pairs, still arguing, their sandals echoing down the corridor. You close the main doors behind them and exhale. Peace at last. Well, peace until tomorrow's circus. You glance at the shelves, the ink stains, the half-finished scrolls, and smile. For all its noise and nonsense, the Athenaeum is still your quiet kingdom. And as you snuff the last lamp, you murmur, virtue without pain, ha! Your fingers are ink-stained, your back aches, and your heart feels oddly full. Maybe both philosophers were right. The afternoon light softens into a golden haze, and with it comes your favorite part of the day, the Roman equivalent of a tea break. Not that tea exists yet. The empire hasn't discovered that particular miracle. What you have instead is a clay cup of watered wine, a crust of bread, and a brief illusion that the world isn't built entirely from papyrus and bureaucracy. You step out into the courtyard of the Athenaeum, where a fig tree leans lazily over a marble bench. The fountain trickles faintly, its stone nymph missing an arm thanks to a clumsy courier from last winter. You sit beneath her one-armed grace and let the breeze comb through your hair. The city hums all around you, vendors calling, hooves clattering, the distant ring of hammer on bronze. Beside you, Decimus appears, carrying his own cup of wine. "Another glorious day of intellectual warfare," he says, flopping down with exaggerated exhaustion. You grin. "At least no one threw a scroll today." He nods. "Progress." You both sip in silence for a while. The air smells of hot stone and roasted chestnuts drifting from a nearby vendor. Somewhere, a child laughs. Somewhere else, someone argues about taxes. The empire spins, oblivious to its librarians. "Do you ever think," Decimus asks, "that we're the quietest people in Rome?" You chuckle. "That depends. Have you ever heard a senator reading poetry?" He laughs, nearly choking on his drink. Point taken. The two of you talk the way people do when the day's noise is finally dimmed. Half jokes, half confessions. He tells you about his dream of opening a small script shop near the docks, where sailors could pay to have letters written to their families. You tell him you once wanted to study in Athens, before realizing that libraries, unlike philosophers, actually feed you regularly. Historians still argue whether Roman librarians were slaves, freedmen, or scholars. In truth, it's a bit of everything. You work for the city, not for fame, but because someone has to guard the empire's memory, and because, in a world obsessed with power, knowledge is the one thing that never stops growing. A small bird lands on the fountain's edge, pecking at the rippling water. You watch it. Content. The bird has no concept of Cicero or Aristotle, and somehow seems happier for it. You sigh. Sometimes I think ignorance really is bliss. Decimus smirks. Then we are doomed. You both laugh quietly, and the sound seems to ripple through the courtyard. Inside, faint voices drift from the reading hall. Someone must have stayed behind, probably Flavia, still sculpting sadness into verse. You hear the scratch of her stylus against wax, steady and sure. There's something soothing about it, like rain tapping on a roof. You reach into your satchel and pull out a small wax tablet of your own. It's not official business, just your private notes. You jot down small thoughts, observations, snippets of overheard absurdity. Virtue without pain, still nonsense, you write, followed by Marcus Julius believes philosophy improves digestion, false. You add a tiny doodle of Minerva rolling her eyes. Writing gossip again. Decimus teases. Archiving humanity. You correct him. He raises his cup. To humanity, then, loud, arrogant, and worth preserving. You clink cups lightly, letting the moment linger. When your bread's gone and your wine has turned lukewarm, you stretch your arms, bones creaking like old floorboards. The shade from the fig tree has shifted, spilling into longer, softer patterns. The day's heat is fading, replaced by a mellow warmth that clings to the marble. You rise and wander back inside, leaving Decimus half asleep under the tree. The Athenaeum feels quieter now, as if it, too, is resting after hours of intellectual combat. Dust motes drift lazily in the beams of fading sunlight. The echo of your sandals seems unusually loud. You pass the philosopher's table and notice a forgotten scroll lying open. You glance at the title, On Friendship. You read a few lines, and the words hit you like a whisper across centuries. True friends share silence as easily as laughter. You smile faintly, thinking of Decimus outside, snoring softly beside the fountain. You roll the scroll carefully and set it back on the shelf. Some truths, you decide, never get old. As you tidy the desks, you spot a stray wax tablet filled with messy scrawls, probably a student's abandoned notes. You read the first line. Knowledge is a flame. The more you share it, the brighter it grows. Underneath, someone else has added, in shakier writing, unless you drop it and burn the table again. You laugh softly. The scribes may not be philosophers, but they understand reality better than most. The smell of parchment mingles with the faint scent of wine from your cup. You think of all the afternoons like this one, the countless days spent balancing the serious and the silly, the sacred and the absurd. You've learned that history isn't just marble busts and decrees, it's jokes whispered between catalogues, breadcrumbs left in scroll boxes, and ink stains that never wash out. As twilight stretches across the floor, the last beams of sunlight touch the shelves, turning the papyrus edges gold. You pause to watch it, transfixed. For a heartbeat, the whole library glows, alive with silent thought. Then it fades, as all things do. You blow out a lamp and murmur, "Back to work, old friend," patting the nearest shelf like a fellow soldier. The Athenaeum doesn't answer, but somehow you feel understood. In a few minutes, you'll start the evening rounds, checking for misplaced scrolls, making sure no student is sleeping behind the rhetoric section again. But for now, you let yourself linger in the quiet, your mind softened by warmth and wine. Rome continues to roar outside, but here, in your shaded courtyard and echoing halls, time has paused, just long enough for you to remember that knowledge, like friendship, grows best in peace. By the time the lamps are lit, the library transforms. The bustle of the day drains away, leaving only the rhythmic flicker of flame against the marble and the faint perfume of oil and wax. You move through the long aisles with a small bronze lamp in hand, its light quivering like a living thought. The night shift is yours, a quieter, slower rhythm that belongs only to those who've made peace with parchment dust and insomnia. Outside, the muffled roar of Rome never stops, but in here, the city's chaos dissolves into whispers. You start by checking the Western Hall, where the scrolls of medicine are stored. The air smells faintly of herbs and glue, remnants from the apothecaries who once annotated their texts with dried rosemary pressed between the leaves. You run your fingers along the row of titles, reading their labels. De Medicina, a barium of cretivas, the healing of wounds by wine. That last one always makes you smile. Historians still argue whether Roman physicians actually used wine as antiseptic. You whisper to yourself, amused. Or just as courage. One scroll, however, catches your eye. Its tag reads simply Fragmentum de Somno, on sleep. You unroll it partway, careful not to snap its brittle fibers. The handwriting is jagged but elegant, and the text muses on dreams as divine messages, delivered by Somnus, the god of slumber. According to the author, the dreams of librarians should be the clearest, because they live closest to wisdom. You roll it back up and snort softly. Clearly, he never met Decimus. A rustle behind you startles your thoughts. You turn and find Flavia again, her cloak pulled tight around her shoulders. "Couldn't sleep," she says simply, holding her own lamp. "I thought I'd copy a bit more." You nod, gesturing toward an empty desk. The two of you work in companionable silence, your lamps throwing twin halos of gold across the marble. She hums softly, a slow, tuneless sound, and it blends with the crackle of wicks and the sigh of parchment. As the night deepens, you find your mind wandering. You think about how many hands have touched these scrolls before yours. Scribes, scholars, slaves, senators. Knowledge passed down through sweat and ink. You wonder if someday, someone will read your handwriting, tracing the faint indentations of your stylus and wondering who you were. Your stomach growls. Dinner was hours ago. You reach into your bag for a small piece of dried fig, chew thoughtfully, and glance up. Flavia's already looking at you. You think too loudly, she teases. You grin, just wondering what future librarians will think of us. That we were underpaid, she says, without missing a beat. You laugh, the sound echoing faintly in the stillness. She leans back, stretching her arms. You ever think about how we'll be remembered? Or if we'll be remembered at all? Sometimes, you admit. But maybe being forgotten isn't so bad. I mean, our scrolls outlive us. Maybe that's enough. Flavia tilts her head, considering. Maybe, though I'd prefer to haunt whoever borrows my favorite scrolls. You smile and turn back to your cataloging. The lamps sputter slightly, shadows rippling along the walls. For a moment, you think you hear distant chanting, some temple ritual drifting through the streets. Rome never truly sleeps. It only murmurs. As the hours stretch thin, you grow drowsy. You set the lamp aside and lean against the cool marble column, closing your eyes for just a second. The warmth of the oil flame flickers against your skin. You imagine yourself drifting through the stacks, weightless, like a ghost of knowledge. You dream, you think, of an enormous scroll unrolling endlessly before you, the script transforming into constellations. Letters swirl like stars, sentences bloom into cities. In the distance, the god Somnus himself lounges on a bed of feathers, watching you with a lazy smile. You guard what others forget, he says. But who guards you? Before you can answer, the dream folds back into darkness. You wake with a start. The lamp beside you has nearly burned out, its wick struggling in the pool of cooling oil. Flavia is gone. Her desk is empty, her scroll neatly tied. You rub your face and chuckle. Dream librarians. Perfect. You rise, stretch your back, and begin your last round before dawn. The city's night air seeps through the open windows, cool, damp, carrying the smell of rain and smoke. Somewhere far away, a patrol's sandals click against the cobblestones. You pass the statue of Minerva near the atrium. Her stone eyes watch you in the wavering lamplight, serene and impenetrable. Someone has placed a single laurel leaf in her hand, probably Flavia's doing. You nod respectfully. At the final shelf, you find a scroll out of place, on the nature of forgetting. You can't help but smile at the irony. You set it back gently, whispering, "Not tonight." The night shift ends when the horizon begins to pale. You climb to the roof terrace as you always do, lamp still in hand. From up here, you can see the forum below, faint outlines emerging as dawn brushes across marble. The first traders are already shouting, their carts squealing. The smell of baking bread drifts from the bakeries. You stand there, watching the city wake. Each morning feels like a quiet reward for surviving another day of dust and discipline. You take a long breath, the chill air filling your lungs. Another day of wisdom and nonsense. You murmur. A pigeon lands on the railing beside you, cooing softly. You offer it a crumb from your pocket. Breakfast for you too, philosopher. Below, the sun creeps higher, catching the bronze dome of the temple nearby and setting it ablaze with light. The world, in all its chaos and ambition, begins again, and you, the humble librarian, will file it neatly between the margins of history. By mid-morning, the city is in full swing again, hoofbeats, haggling, and 1,000 errands weaving through the maze of Rome. You trudge through the narrow side street toward the Taberna Libraria, the book market, to fetch a delivery of new scrolls. The air smells of wet clay and hot bread. The paving stones are still slick from dawn's drizzle, and your sandals squeak slightly as you walk. The market district is a chaos of voices. Vendors shout over each other, peddling everything from dates and garlic to cheap ink and second-hand wax tablets. It's not glamorous, but it's the beating heart of Roman literacy, where knowledge is bartered like grain. Your favorite stall sits at the far corner, shaded by a sun-bleached awning. A thin man named Lucius runs it, his hair perpetually ink-stained and his tunic more patched than fabric. He spots you immediately. "Ah, my favorite hoarder of wisdom," he calls, grinning like a fox. "You're here for the Cicero copies, yes?" "That's the rumor," you reply, handing him a small wooden token stamped with the Athenaeum seal. Lucius ducks under the table and returns with a bundle wrapped in linen. He sets it down with mock reverence. Fresh from Alexandria, or so the courier swears. Of course, the courier also claimed to be a centaur last week. You chuckle. So, forged or just optimistic? He shrugs. 50-50. The ink's new, though. Smells legitimate. You untie the bundle and unroll a few inches of papyrus. The handwriting is elegant, the Greek marginalia clean. The treatise is de officiis, on duties, and the scribe's signature is a small, careful monogram. "Not bad," you murmur. Lucius leans inconspiratorially. "I threw in something extra. Found it in a crate of damaged rolls from Athens. Don't tell your supervisor." You raise an eyebrow. "Why do I feel this is not a cookbook?" He grins wider. "You'll see." Tucked beneath the official copies lies a short, slim roll with no label. You unroll just enough to read the first few words, De risibus et somnius, on laughter and dreams. The author's name has been scratched out, replaced by a single cryptic mark, a crescent moon. You frown. Never heard of it. Lucius spreads his hands. Maybe that's the fun of it. Lost philosophers are my best sellers. You sigh but tuck the scroll into your satchel anyway. You'll ruin me someday. He bows dramatically. If I do, may I have your shelf space? You toss him a few bronze coins and turn to leave, dodging a child chasing a runaway goose. As you make your way back to the Athenaeum, you can't stop thinking about that strange scroll. A treatise on laughter and dreams? It feels oddly personal, like it's waiting for you to read it at the wrong moment. Back at the library, You lay the bundle on your desk. Decimus appears almost instantly, drawn by the scent of new parchment like a hound. "Oh, fresh Cicero?" he asks, eyes wide. "Do we finally get to argue about Judy again?" "Always," you say. "But there's something else." You hand him the unlabeled scroll. He squints. "On laughter and dreams?" Sounds like philosophy written by someone with too much time. "That's every philosopher," you reply. He unrolls a bit and begins to read aloud. "To laugh is to awaken the soul. To dream is to remember where it sleeps." He glances at you. Pretentious. I like it. You both chuckle, but the words stick in your mind. You've spent your life surrounded by other people's ideas, but this one feels different. You set the scroll aside for later, pretending not to care. The day passes in the slow rhythm of copying and cataloguing. Quills scratch, pages whisper, lamps as softly as oil bubbles in the bowls. You fall into the trance of routine. Record, check, file, repeat. Yet every now and then, your eyes drift toward the mystery scroll. It sits quietly on your desk, daring you to open it. Finally, at dusk, you give in. You unroll the scroll completely, revealing a text far shorter than expected, just a few paragraphs. The author muses that laughter is the language of gods who pity humans, and dreams are the echoes of those laughs that mortals can almost understand. Then, near the end, a strange line. Those who read this may find their own laughter echoed in the hours of sleep. You snort. What does that even mean? Decimus peers over your shoulder. Probably that if you read too much, you'll start laughing in your dreams. Happened to me once after too much satire. Historians still argue whether Romans really believed books could curse or bless. You mutter, half amused, half uneasy. Maybe this one's both. That night, you lock the scroll in a chest under your desk, half jokingly muttering a prayer to Somnus. No nightmares, please. But sleep finds you anyway, swift and heavy. You dream of the Athenaeum, silent and glowing, each scroll unrolling by itself. Laughter echoes softly through the aisles, gentle, almost kind. You follow the sound until you reach your desk, where the mystery scroll lies open. The words shimmer, shifting into an image, your own reflection, smiling back at you, whispering something you can't quite catch. Then you wake up, heart pounding. The lamp beside your bed still burns, its flame steady. You sit up, rub your eyes, and murmur, "Too much Cicero before bed." Still, as you lie back down, you can't help but hear a faint chuckle, so quiet it could be memory, or something older still. By mid-morning, the city is in full swing again, hoofbeats, haggling, and 1,000 errands weaving through the maze of Rome. You trudge through the narrow side street toward the Taberna Libraria, the book market, to fetch a delivery of new scrolls. The air smells of wet clay and hot bread. The paving stones are still slick from dawn's drizzle, and your sandals squeak slightly as you walk. The market district is a chaos of voices. Vendors shout over each other, peddling everything from dates and garlic to cheap ink and second-hand wax tablets. It's not glamorous, but it's the beating heart of Roman literacy, where knowledge is bartered like grain. Your favorite stall sits at the far corner, shaded by a sun-bleached awning. A thin man named Lucius runs it, his hair perpetually ink-stained and his tunic more patched than fabric. He spots you immediately. "Ah, my favorite hoarder of wisdom," he calls, grinning like a fox. "You're here for the Cicero copies, yes?" "That's the rumor," you reply, handing him a small wooden token stamped with the Athenaeum seal. Lucius ducks under the table and returns with a bundle wrapped in linen. He sets it down with mock reverence. Fresh from Alexandria, or so the courier swears. Of course, the courier also claimed to be a centaur last week. You chuckle. So, forged or just optimistic? He shrugs. 50-50. The ink's new, though. Smells legitimate. You untie the bundle and unroll a few inches of papyrus. The handwriting is elegant, the Greek marginalia clean. The treatise is Dorificius, on duties, and the scribe's signature is a small, careful monogram. "Not bad," you murmur. Lucius leans inconspiratorially. "I threw in something extra. Found it in a crate of damaged rolls from Athens. Don't tell your supervisor." You raise an eyebrow. "Why do I feel this is not a cookbook?" He grins wider. "You'll see." Tucked beneath the official copies lies a short, slim roll with no label. You unroll just enough to read the first few words, Derisibus et somnius, on laughter and dreams. The author's name has been scratched out, replaced by a single cryptic mark, a crescent moon. You frown. Never heard of it. Lucius spreads his hands. Maybe that's the fun of it. Lost philosophers are my best sellers. You sigh but tuck the scroll into your satchel anyway. You'll ruin me someday. He bows dramatically. If I do, may I have your shelf space? You toss him a few bronze coins and turn to leave, dodging a child chasing a runaway goose. As you make your way back to the Athenaeum, you can't stop thinking about that strange scroll. A treatise on laughter and dreams? It feels oddly personal, like it's waiting for you to read it at the wrong moment. Back at the library, you lay the bundle on your desk. Decimus appears almost instantly, drawn by the scent of new parchment like a hound. "Oh, fresh Cicero?" he asks, eyes wide. "Do we finally get to argue about duty again?" "Always," you say. "But there's something else." You hand him the unlabeled scroll. He squints. On laughter and dreams? Sounds like philosophy written by someone with too much time. "That's every philosopher," you reply. He unrolls a bit and begins to read aloud. To laugh is to awaken the soul. To dream is to remember where it sleeps. He glances at you. Pretentious. I like it. You both chuckle, but the words stick in your mind. You've spent your life surrounded by other people's ideas, but this one feels different. You set the scroll aside for later, pretending not to care. The day passes in the slow rhythm of copying and cataloguing. Quills scratch, pages whisper, lamps as softly as oil bubbles in the bowls. You fall into the trance of routine. Record, check, file, repeat. Yet every now and then, your eyes drift toward the mystery scroll. It sits quietly on your desk, daring you to open it. Finally, at dusk, you give in. You unroll the scroll completely, revealing a text far shorter than expected, just a few paragraphs. The author muses that laughter is the language of gods who pity humans, and dreams are the echoes of those laughs that mortals can almost understand. Then, near the end, a strange line. Those who read this may find their own laughter echoed in the hours of sleep. You snort. What does that even mean? Decimus peers over your shoulder. Probably that if you read too much, you'll start laughing in your dreams. Happened to me once after too much satire. Historians still argue whether Romans really believed books could curse or bless. You mutter, half amused, half uneasy. Maybe this one's both. That night, you lock the scroll in a chest under your desk, half-jokingly muttering a prayer to Somnus. No nightmares, please. But sleep finds you anyway, swift and heavy. You dream of the Athenaeum, silent and glowing, each scroll unrolling by itself. Laughter echoes softly through the aisles, gentle, almost kind. You follow the sound until you reach your desk, where the mystery scroll lies open. The words shimmer, shifting into an image, your own reflection, smiling back at you, whispering something you can't quite catch. Then you wake up, heart pounding. The lamp beside your bed still burns, its flame steady. You sit up, rub your eyes, and murmur, too much Cicero before bed. Still, as you lie back down, you can't help but hear a faint chuckle, so quiet it could be memory, or something older still. Morning drags you from sleep like a reluctant scholar pulled from his scrolls. The sun filters weakly through the lattice window, turning the air into ribbons of gold dust. You blink, stretch, and half expect to see that strange moon-marked scroll still glowing somewhere. It isn't. It sits exactly where you left it, rolled, tied, harmless. Still, you can't shake the echo of last night's dream. That laughter, it wasn't mocking. It was knowing, somehow. You pour yourself a cup of watered wine, convincing yourself that this is what happens when you let philosophy into your sleeping hours. At the Athenaeum, the day begins like any other. Ink stains, bickering scribes, and the occasional argument about who last borrowed the histories of Polybius. You fall into rhythm, but there's a strange buoyancy in you, a leftover weightlessness from the dream. Flavia notices it first. You look suspiciously cheerful, she says as she sharpens her stylus. Did Cicero finally teach you how to nap upright? Better, you say, smirking. I might have discovered divine humor. She groans. Please don't tell me you joined the cult of laughter. It's not a cult, you reply, mock offended. It's more of a side effect. You tell her about the anonymous scroll, the odd inscription, the strange dream. She listens, one eyebrow arched higher than the other. So you read a mysterious text and now hear divine laughter in your sleep. Yes. Fascinating, she says dryly. You've officially gone full philosopher. Next, you'll be telling us that ink has feelings. You grin. Only the black ink. The red's just angry all the time. Flavia shakes her head, but her lips twitch with amusement. Well, if you start levitating during cataloguing, warn me first. I'd like to charge admission. The day continues, a soft carousel of motion and murmurs. But beneath the surface, something hums, a quiet awareness. When you handle scrolls, they seem warmer than usual, as if alive under your fingertips. The air itself feels thicker, laden with whispers just below the threshold of sound. Around midday, you step out for a break, crossing the courtyard. The fig tree casts its familiar patch of shade. You sit, and for a moment, you swear you hear faint laughter again, gentle, rippling through the leaves. You look up. Nothing. Just a pigeon tilting its head at you, unimpressed. Don't mock me, you mutter. The pigeon coos in what could easily be taken as sarcasm. Decimus finds you like that, staring suspiciously at the bird. Having a staring contest with the gods again. They're winning, you sigh. He sits beside you, handing over half a loaf of bread. You need more sleep. Too many philosophers have gone mad from wisdom. Or pigeons. You laugh, tearing off a piece. I think it's the same thing. You tell him about the scroll, too. He listens, half amused, half concerned. You sure you're not just overworked? We catalogued 6 crates yesterday. Maybe you inhaled too much papyrus dust. Maybe, you admit. But the dream felt deliberate. Like someone, or something, was trying to remind me of something. Like what? You hesitate. That the past isn't dead. Just drowsy. Decimus stares at you. And you think I'm dramatic. You both laugh, the sound echoing softly in the marble courtyard. Still, when you return to your desk, the feeling persists. You decide to study the scroll again after hours. Until then, you busy yourself with safer work, restoring damaged fragments of poetry. One piece, barely legible, reads, "Sleep is not forgetting, it is remembering softly." The line sends a shiver through you. A coincidence, surely, but still, odd. As dusk falls, you light your lamp and untie the mystery scroll once more. The ink looks slightly different now, darker, as if refreshed by unseen hands. You read the last line again. Those who read this may find their own laughter echoed in the hours of sleep. Then, below it, something new, a faint symbol drawn in fresh ink, a crescent over a single dot. You're certain it wasn't there before. Historians still argue whether Roman scribes sometimes altered texts after copying them, you whisper. But they never mentioned ghosts doing revisions. A cold draft slips through the room. The lamp flame flutters violently, then steadies. You glance around. Nothing moves. The air, however, feels charged, like the moment before lightning. You roll the scroll back up, set it aside, and press your palms against the desk. All right, you murmur. If this is divine humor, I'm not laughing. You tidy your things, trying to shake off the unease. As you leave the hall, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in the bronze mirror mounted near the entrance. For a heartbeat, you swear it smiles a moment longer than you do. That night, the dream returns. You're in the Athenaeum again, but the walls are lined not with scrolls but with sleeping people. Hundreds of them, breathing softly, their dreams curling upward like mist. You walk among them, and each exhale sounds like laughter. At the center of the hall stands a figure cloaked in shadows, face hidden beneath a silver mask shaped like a half-moon. When you approach, it raises a finger to its lips. Knowledge sleeps, it whispers, and you are its dream. The voice feels like it comes from everywhere at once, soft, kind, infinite. You wake suddenly, heart hammering. The lamp beside you has gone out. In the darkness, the silence feels impossibly deep. You sit up, staring toward your desk. The scroll lies there, motionless, but in the faint light of dawn, the ink glimmers just enough to catch your eye, like a smile. By morning, you've convinced yourself it was just another overactive dream. Philosophical insomnia mixed with too much lamp oil, Rome's deadliest combination. Still, you walk into the Athenaeum with a faint unease clinging to your shoulders, like the last chill of dawn that refuses to burn off. The air inside feels different today. Heavier, maybe, or just quieter. The usual chatter of scribes hasn't started yet, and even the echo of your sandals sounds muted. You try to shake it off, dropping your satchel onto the desk with a solid thud. The scroll sits there exactly as you left it, sealed tight, serene, harmless. You tell yourself not to look at it. You immediately look at it. Flavia arrives first, humming under her breath and carrying a jug of fresh ink. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she says, pouring carefully. "Not a ghost," you reply. "Just a philosopher with bad sleep hygiene." "That's every philosopher," she mutters. You manage a smile and set to work. Today's task, reorganizing the geography section, which, according to Decimus, has been in chaos since Pompey discovered more of the world than our shelves could handle. You begin sorting the rolls by region: Africa, Hispania, Asia Minor, each one labeled in fading script. But as you work, the faintest scent drifts through the room: myrrh and smoke. You pause. The others don't seem to notice. "Smell that?" you ask. Flavia sniffs. "All I smell is ink." "You sure you're not developing prophetic sinuses?" "Entirely possible," you mumble. By midday, the feeling of strangeness intensifies. A courier arrives with a new crate of scrolls, fresh copies from Alexandria, sealed with wax and stamped with the emblem of the Serapeum. You slice the seal and lift the lid. A faint golden dust drifts out, catching the light like motes of fire. Decimus peers over your shoulder. "Looks expensive." "Looks cursed," you reply. He grins. "Same thing, really." Inside the crate, you find the expected texts: histories, treatises, commentaries. But at the very bottom lies something odd: a fragment of papyrus rolled inside a piece of linen. No label, no signature, only a short line written in Greek across the outer strip: "Do not dream it twice." You exhale slowly. "Perfect," you mutter. "Exactly what I needed. Cryptic bedtime advice." Decimus laughs. Maybe it's a proverb. Or a marketing slogan. You unroll the fragment just enough to glimpse faint writing. Nothing legible at first, but the ink seems to shimmer faintly, like oil on water. Then, under the shifting light, you spot a familiar mark: a crescent moon above a dot. Your heart thumps. This again. What again? You hesitate. Just a symbol. I've seen it before. He frowns, glancing at your desk where the other scroll lies hidden beneath a pile of safer history. Maybe your anonymous philosopher has fans. Or followers, you say. The two of you exchange a look that says, "We are absolutely going to regret this later." And then, of course, you read it. The text is fragmentary, but enough remains to piece together something unnerving. A dialogue between two scholars about whether laughter exists beyond death. One argues that laughter is a sound born of air, and thus mortal. The other insists it is eternal, because it springs from knowledge, and knowledge never dies. The debate ends abruptly with the line: "And so they laughed, until one did not wake." You roll the papyrus back up very carefully. "We are putting this one in the restricted section," you say firmly. Decimus raises an eyebrow. "Since when do we have a restricted section?" "Since now." You stash both scrolls, the laughing one and the fragment, into a small chest beneath your desk, locking it tight. You feel a little ridiculous, but also, inexplicably, safer. The rest of the day drifts on in a haze of normality. The scholars argue about maps, Flavia mutters rhymes, Decimus hums tunelessly while copying Pliny. The world seems stable again. Until dusk. As you're closing up, you notice that one of the lamps near the main door is still burning, though you distinctly remember extinguishing it earlier. The flame is steady, unnaturally so, too bright, too still. You approach cautiously. Beneath it, on the desk, lies a scrap of papyrus. You pick it up. 4 words, written in neat, flowing script: "Dreams keep their promises." Your stomach drops. You glance around, but the hall is empty. Even the air feels expectant. For a moment, you consider calling out for Decimus or Flavia, but something stops you, an instinct, deep and quiet, that says whatever this is, it's meant only for you. You fold the papyrus and tuck it into your sleeve. "All right," you whisper. "If the gods want to send notes, they'd better start paying rent." That night, your dreams return. but not in the same hall as before. This time, you're outside the library, walking through a room that feels like a memory. The streets shimmer, edges blurred like wet ink. The air is filled with faint laughter again, but now it sounds closer, almost intimate. You turn a corner and see the Athenaeum glowing softly in the dark, its doors open, light spilling out like honey. Inside, the moon-masked figure waits. "Why me?" you ask, the words catching in your throat. It tilts its head. "Because you listen." Then it gestures toward the shelves, and you see that every scroll there is blank, smooth, unmarked parchment. You reach out to touch one, and the ink begins to appear under your fingers, your handwriting. Line after line, words you've never written forming themselves as you watch. He dreams, and the Empire remembers. You wake with the taste of myrrh on your tongue and the faint sound of laughter fading into the dawn. Historians still argue whether Romans believed dreams could be divine messages or just indigestion. You're leaning heavily toward the first option. The morning feels brittle. Light slants through the atrium like shards of gold, but something beneath it trembles. You move through the Athenaeum as if in a dream, half alert, half elsewhere. The sounds of daily life go on as usual. The soft scrape of styluses, the droning hum of debate from the philosopher's table, the faint splash of the fountain outside. Yet everything seems a heartbeat too slow, like the city itself is thinking about something it can't quite recall. You try to tell yourself you're fine. After all, you've spent years surrounded by ink and illusion, texts that claim to speak with gods, treatises promising immortality through rhetoric. None of it ever followed you home before. Flavia waves from across the hall. "You look haunted," she says cheerfully. "More than usual, I mean." "Just tired," you mutter, sorting scrolls without reading their titles. "Maybe you should take a day off," she suggests. "Go to the baths. Or the tavern. Or literally anywhere that isn't haunted by paperwork." You grin weakly. Tempting. But if I abandon the archives, Rome collapses. She raises an eyebrow. "So that's what keeps the Empire running, your filing system." "Obviously." She laughs, and for a brief, merciful moment, the sound breaks the tension. Then Decimus bursts in from the outer hall, waving a wax tablet. "You'll love this," he says breathlessly. "We just received a letter from Alexandria. The Serapeum's catalogue's burned, again." You freeze mid-motion. "What?" He nods grimly. "Lightning, supposedly. Or maybe politics. Historians still argue which fire was which." You swallow. The Serapeum, Rome's sister library, a monument to knowledge, gone again. You think of the crates you've received from there, the strange fragments, the moon-marked scrolls. Did they lose everything? You ask. "Not everything," Decimus says. "A few rescued texts are being sent here for safekeeping. They should arrive tomorrow." You manage a slow nod. "Of course. We'll make room." But inside, a different realization stirs. The timing. First the moon scrolls, now another fire. You can't help but feel the two are somehow connected. Threads of the same strange tapestry weaving themselves through history. The day moves forward, heavy with unease. Around noon, the sky darkens unexpectedly. A summer storm rolls in, thunder rumbling like distant applause. Rain lashes against the marble columns, filling the air with the scent of wet stone. The Athenaeum grows dim, and the scribes light extra lamps. Shadows dance across the frescoed walls. Minerva, Jupiter, the Muses, gods of wisdom flickering between life and myth. You can't tell which side they prefer. You retreat to your desk, trying to concentrate. The chest containing the mysterious scroll sits beneath it, silent, yet you can feel their presence like a pulse in the floor. A drop of rain sneaks through the roof and lands on your hand. You stare at it, absurdly grateful for something so ordinary. But then, faintly, from somewhere in the stacks, you hear laughter. Soft, distant, familiar. You freeze. The storm roars, thunder echoing, but beneath it, the sound persists, gentle, echoing through marble corridors. You glance toward Decimus and Flavia, but they seem oblivious. The laughter continues, weaving between the aisles like a trick of wind. You rise slowly and follow it. Past the medicine scrolls, past the geometry section, past the alcove where the statue of Minerva stands watch. Her stone eyes gleam in the lamplight. The sound stops. You exhale. "All right," you whisper. You win. "Show yourself." Nothing. Then, as you turn to leave, you notice something odd, a scroll lying open on the floor. You stoop to pick it up, expecting another misplaced text, but your breath catches when you see the title, De Risibus et Somnius. The same scroll. Only, you left it locked in the chest. You stare at it, heart thudding. The ink looks fresher than ever. A single new line has appeared beneath the final passage. To laugh is to wake twice. You whisper the words aloud. They sound strange in your own voice, half incantation, half prophecy. The moment you finish, a gust of wind slams through the hall, blowing out several lamps at once. The shadows shiver, alive for a heartbeat, and the laughter returns, this time closer, louder, unmistakably real. You stumble back, clutching the scroll. Enough, you whisper. Enough games. But the sound fades, replaced by silence so thick it feels solid. When you relight a lamp, everything looks normal again. The scroll sits in your trembling hands, innocent as ever. You glance toward the doorway, expecting to see Decimus smirking at your expense, but no one's there. The hall is empty. That night, you try not to sleep. You pace your small apartment, rereading the same line over and over. To laugh is to wake twice. You wonder what it means. You wonder if it's a warning. Outside, the storm fades, leaving only the soft patter of dripping eaves. Eventually, exhaustion wins. You drift into sleep sitting upright at your desk. This time, the dream begins before you realize you've crossed into it. The Athenaeum again, but now, the scrolls hum softly, glowing with faint golden light. You walk between them, and each title whispers your name. At the center stands the moon-masked figure. It doesn't speak, but raises a hand toward you. In its palm lies the crescent and dot symbol, glowing faintly. You reach out, and for a moment, your fingertips touch. A surge of warmth floods through you, not frightening, just vast. Then you see flashes, scrolls burning, water flooding marble floors, voices arguing across centuries. All of history, looping, repeating, being written and rewritten by unseen hands. You hear laughter again, not mocking this time, but sorrowful. When you wake, your lamp has burned out, and your room smells faintly of myrrh again. You look down at your palm. A smear of ink, shaped like a crescent moon. You exhale shakily. All right, you whisper to the dark. I'm listening. And somewhere, so faintly you might have imagined it, the laughter answers. You come to the next morning with the vague sensation that you've been running. Your body aches like you've climbed every stair in the Colosseum, though you don't recall leaving your chair. The faint ink crescent on your palm is still there, smudged but stubborn, and the first thought that hits you is ridiculous. Maybe you should catalogue it. Give it a neat little entry. Artifact. Unknown origin. Possibly imaginary. You head to the Athenaeum earlier than usual. The city feels freshly washed from last night's storm, but quieter than normal, as if Rome itself has decided to sleep in. Street vendors are only just opening, sweeping rainwater off their stalls. The smell of wet bread, olive oil, and marble dust follows you all the way to the great library gates. Inside, everything gleams slightly. The marble floors glisten, and somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon coos, a survivor of the storm, no doubt. The scribes haven't yet arrived. You relish the silence for once. It's a fragile sort of peace, like a breath you're afraid to let out. You move automatically through your routine, lighting the oil lamps, unlocking the storage chests, counting the day's scrolls. The damaged ones still await restoration, their ends frayed and brittle. Then your gaze falls to the wooden chest under your desk, the one that holds the moon-marked scrolls. You hesitate, hand on the latch. You know what you'll see, the same faint shimmer, the same curling edges of parchment that seem to breathe in their own slow rhythm. But when you open the chest, something's changed. The topmost scroll, the one titled De Risibus et Somnius, is gone. You check the room twice. The chest is empty but for a faint dusting of gold powder, as if sunlight itself had shed its skin. You sigh. Well, that's fine. Scrolls just walk now. Completely normal. A voice answers behind you, startling you so badly you almost drop the lamp. Talking to the documents again. You whirl to see Flavia leaning in the doorway, her hair damp from the morning rain, a scroll tucked under her arm. Do you ever knock? You ask, heart still pounding. I did, she says, but you were busy having an argument with a box. You force a chuckle. Occupational hazard. She steps closer, squinting at the faint smear on your hand. You spill ink again. Something like that. Uh-huh. Her tone makes it clear she doesn't believe you, but she lets it slide. Anyway, the apprentices are coming soon. You promised them a lesson on cataloging today. Did I? You did. Don't make me quote you verbatim. I wrote it down. You groan, rubbing your temples. Fine. Send them in. The students arrive like a small, enthusiastic flock of starlings, half energy, half confusion. They're a mix of patrician sons, aspiring scribes, and the occasional curious daughter disguised under a borrowed toga. They chatter, stumble, drop styluses, and seem entirely unaware of the weight of history pressing down on the marble around them. You begin the lesson as you always do. Rule 1, you say, never trust a scroll without reading its title. Rule 2, never assume two scrolls with the same title say the same thing. Romans are terrible at naming things. And Rule 3, don't spill wine on Aristotle again, one apprentice interrupts. You glare playfully. Yes, thank you, Lucius. Rule 3, don't spill anything on Aristotle. They laugh, and for a while, the sound chases away the lingering unease. You guide them through the aisles, showing how to align the catalogues, how to spot a falsified seal, how to check for scrolls that have been recopied by nervous students too afraid to admit their mistakes. One girl, small and sharp-eyed, lingers behind. Master, she asks softly, what's that symbol on your hand? You glance down instinctively. The crescent is faint but visible. Old ink, you lie. She nods solemnly. It looks like the mark on the scroll you were reading last week, the one about dreams. You stop. You notice that. I was cleaning near your desk, she says. It glowed a little. I thought maybe it was a trick of the lamp. You study her face. No mischief there, just curiosity. What's your name again? Vibia, she says. My father's a papyrus merchant. Vibia, you repeat slowly. If you ever see a scroll like that again, you come to me first, understood? She nods, though her brow furrows with questions. The lesson continues, and by midday, the apprentices drift out to fetch lunch. You stay behind to tidy the desks. The hall is warm, sunlight spilling across the mosaic floors, glinting off the gilt edges of statues. Everything feels almost normal again. Almost. You find yourself humming under your breath, a tune you don't remember learning. Something lilting and cyclical, like the rhythm of the scribe's quills. When you stop, the silence feels heavy, as if the melody is still continuing somewhere beyond your hearing. Historians still argue whether the Romans actually had music of the spheres theories, that the cosmos itself produced inaudible harmonies, but in that moment, you could almost believe it. The air hums faintly, and you swear the scroll racks seem to vibrate in answer. You blink, shake your head, and reach for your stylus. You need to write this down, if only to prove you're not losing your mind. But when you unroll a blank sheet of parchment, the words that appear are not your own. Ink remembers. Laughter returns. Keep the moonlight safe. You drop the stylus. The letters shimmer once, then fade, leaving only the faintest ghost of color. You rub your eyes. Too much caffeine, you mutter. Or not enough. By the time the apprentices return, you've hidden the parchment away. You resume your role, calm, slightly sardonic, utterly ordinary. You talk about Roman cataloging, about ink viscosity, about how Pliny once claimed libraries could whisper to the mind. No one laughs at that line, but you do. Quietly. Because for once, you think Pliny might have been right. That night, when you leave the Athenaeum, the crescent on your palm glows faintly again under the street lamps. The moon hangs low and round, like an unblinking eye. And somewhere deep inside the marble walls behind you, something, paper, ink, or ghost, seems to breathe in time with the turning of the night. Night drapes over Rome like a soft, heavy curtain. The streets outside the Athenaeum quiet long before the moon reaches its peak. Only the occasional sound of sandals on cobblestone, or the rattle of a cart, drifts through the open arches. Inside, the library exhales, long, slow, and ancient. The torches along the main hall burn low, their flames barely clinging to life, throwing more shadow than light. You stand by the doorway, holding a lamp, watching dust motes swirl lazily through the air. This is the part of your day no one envies, the night shift. Everyone assumes it's peaceful, meditative even. Fewer visitors, no noisy apprentices, just you and the scrolls. But they forget the other thing about silence. It amplifies everything else. The creak of wood becomes footsteps. The whisper of parchment becomes breath. You move between shelves, the lamp circle of light following you like a loyal dog. The familiar smell of papyrus, oil, and faint mold comforts you at first, until you pass the alcove where Minerva's statue stands. You pause, realizing you can hear something, soft, rhythmic, almost like humming. You freeze, then step closer. The statue, serene and eternal, looks back at you with the same calm defiance she's worn for centuries. You tilt your head. The sound fades. Just wind, you mutter. Or imagination. Or ghosts, but probably wind. A joke, but not a confident one. You continue your patrol, checking that each section is dry, that no torches burn too low, that no curious mice are nibbling the precious papyrus. Everything seems in order until you reach the astronomy alcove. Someone, or something, has moved the moon-marked chest. It sits open on the floor, lid leaning back like a yawning mouth. Inside, only a few scroll fragments, glimmering faintly in the lamplight. You kneel, pulse quickening. The fragments are arranged in a circle, their edges overlapping, the inked crescents aligning perfectly to form a full moon. You whisper to yourself, "Who did this?" A voice answers, low and echoing, from behind a column, "You did." You nearly drop the lamp. "Decimus." No answer. You raise the lamp higher, casting long shadows across the mosaic floor. The flames dance and stretch, making the statues look momentarily alive. Then you see movement, a flicker of white, like a robe disappearing between shelves. You follow, heart hammering. Who's there? The hall narrows, your footsteps soft on the marble. You pass the legal codices, the Greek texts, the forbidden poetry section you pretend doesn't exist. The air grows cooler. You can smell myrrh again. At the very back of the library, near the sealed door to the archives no one uses anymore, the figure stops. A tall silhouette, hooded, hands clasped before it. You raise the lamp. "If this is a prank," you say, voice shaking, "you've officially outdone yourself." The figure turns its head slightly. You see only a gleam of gold, mask-like, moon-shaped, the same as in your dreams. You should run. You know that. Instead, you whisper, "What are you?" Its voice is layered, as though two people speak at once, one near, one impossibly far. Keeper of laughter. Keeper of ink. You hold what was lost. You tighten your grip on the lamp. You mean the scrolls. The figure tilts its head. The words remember themselves. You are only the echo. You want to ask what that means, but the flame sputters violently, and the air turns colder still. The lamp goes out. Darkness. Only your breathing. Then, a faint, silvery light glows from the fragments on the floor, back near the astronomy alcove. It spills through the stacks like liquid moonlight. You stumble toward it, hands trembling. The scroll fragments rise slowly, weightless, aligning themselves midair. Letters shift and rearrange like living things, forming new sentences, then dissolving again. You can't read them all, but one line lingers clear and bright before fading. The word sleeps, but the reader dreams it awake. You whisper it aloud. The glow flares, and then the light collapses inward, like a breath being drawn back into the body of the world. When your eyes adjust, you're alone. The chest sits closed once more, untouched. The hall looks ordinary. The only trace of what happened is the faint silver residue dusting your fingertips. You sink onto a bench, heart still racing. You probably won't survive this, you mutter to yourself, but at least it'll make a good footnote. You sit there for a long time, listening. Rome sleeps outside. The rain from earlier drips faintly from the roof gutters, each drop echoing like the ticking of an unseen clock. And in that rhythm, that slow, hypnotic beat, something calms inside you. Historians still argue whether Romans believed their libraries were haunted by the spirits of their authors. Cicero dismissed the idea, Pliny flirted with it, Seneca just avoided libraries after dark entirely. But sitting there, you think maybe they were all a little right. Maybe every scribe leaves a part of their soul in the ink, waiting for someone, anyone, to listen again. You stay until dawn bleeds pale light into the skylight. When Flavia arrives and finds you still at your post, she just sighs. "Did you sleep here again?" Something like that. You look awful. "Thank you," you reply. I've been communing with the gods of filing systems. She smirks. Well, tell them to finish the index. You almost laugh. Almost. Because for once, you're not sure where the joke ends and the truth begins. You arrive at the Athenaeum the next morning to find the air thick with tension. Even before you reach the main doors, you can sense it. Guards lingering in the courtyard, a scribe dropping his stylus mid-sentence, the soft but unmistakable hush that follows bad news. Flavia meets you in the vestibule, her expression grim. He's here, she whispers. You blink. Who's here? She tilts her head toward the atrium. The Imperial Courier. From the Palatine. You groan softly. Please tell me it's about overdue scrolls and not something worse. Her silence answers for her. Inside, the atmosphere has the same brittle quality as before a thunderstorm. The courier stands in the center of the room, a man in crimson-trimmed robes, posture painfully straight, a wax-sealed decree clutched in his hand like a weapon. Behind him, the senior librarian, old Tullius, looks as though he's swallowed a lemon whole. You bow slightly, murmuring, "Salve." The courier doesn't return it. You are the librarian responsible for the special archives. I assist with them, yes. He breaks the seal on the scroll with a neat flick of his ring. The crack of wax sounds like a thunderclap. He begins to read, voice clear and cold. By decree of His Imperial Majesty, and in the interest of moral and civic purity, all texts deemed contrary to the harmony of the state shall be removed from circulation and transferred to secure custody. Specifically, he pauses, glancing at you, any works of foreign mysticism, dream interpretation, or celestial speculation. Your stomach sinks. Dream interpretation. Flavia shoots you a sharp look. You both know what that means. The courier continues, failure to comply within 3 days will be considered an act of negligence, or worse, treason by concealment of heretical material. You manage a careful breath. Of course, you say smoothly. The Athenaeum will comply fully. The courier nods once, satisfied. A guard detachment will arrive tomorrow to assist with collection. He rolls up the decree, snaps the wax seal back in place, and leaves without another word. The silence he leaves behind is deafening. Flavia exhales sharply. Well, she mutters, that's a fun start to the week. Tullius slumps into a chair. They'll take half our catalogues, he groans. Astrology, medicine, even geometry if it mentions the heavens. The fools think they can censor the stars. You glance at the chest under your desk, the one that shouldn't exist. What about the restricted section? You ask carefully. Tullius waves a hand. Seal it off. Burn what you must. The Empire prefers ignorance to imagination these days. You nod, though your heart hammers. Burn what you must. By midday, rumor spread through the Athenaeum like spilled ink. Scholars whisper about lists being drawn, scrolls disappearing overnight. Some scribes openly panic, others shrug, muttering that imperial decrees come and go like bad weather. But you can't stop thinking about that glowing scroll, or the moon-marked seal still faint on your hand. Foreign mysticism. You can practically hear the Emperor's advisors spitting the words. That evening, when the last visitors leave and the doors are bolted shut, you stay behind. Flavia lingers too, as if she knows you'll do something foolish. You're not thinking of hiding them, she says. You feign innocence. Hiding what? The dream scrolls. Don't play dumb. You grin faintly. You wound me. Seriously, she insists, crossing her arms. If the guards find anything, it's both our heads. Maybe, you admit, lowering your voice, but if they burn those texts, they'll erase ideas we don't even understand yet. They're older than Rome. Older than reason, maybe. She sighs. You sound like a philosopher. I'm a librarian. It's worse. Despite herself, she laughs, a short, helpless sound. Then her face softens. Fine, she murmurs. If we do this, we do it carefully. You both spend the night moving through the stacks like conspirators. You choose scrolls at random, some dangerous, some perfectly mundane, anything to confuse an inspector. You tuck the true contraband inside the marble base of Minerva's statue, where a loose panel hides a hollow space known only to you and, now, Flavia. As you slide the final moon-marked scroll into the darkness, you whisper, "Keep it safe." The words feel heavier than you expect, almost like a prayer. Around midnight, Thunder rumbles in the distance. Rain begins again, of course it does, and the flickering torchlight paints the statue's face in golden shadow. For a moment, you could swear Minerva's marble lips tilt into a knowing smirk. Historians still argue whether the Romans believed their gods actually lived in statues. You murmur, "I'd say it depends on how much sleep you've had." Flavia snorts softly. Then you're definitely seeing them. By dawn, your work is done. The forbidden scrolls are hidden, replaced by decoys, harmless copies of poetry and shipping ledgers. The Athenaeum looks as serene as ever, as if no quiet rebellion had passed through its halls. When the guards arrive later that morning, they find nothing amiss. They search, they scowl, they confiscate a few texts on dream interpretation that you left deliberately in plain sight. Then they leave, unimpressed. Flavia exhales a long, shaky breath. "We are in the clear," she says. You nod, though you don't quite believe it. That night, as you close the doors behind you, you catch sight of the moon high above the forum, perfectly round, perfectly silent. You rub your palm. The faint increscent has deepened again, glowing softly in the dark. "Keeper of laughter," you whisper. "I kept it safe." And though the city sleeps, though the streets are empty, you swear you hear someone, something, laugh, low and grateful, carried away on the Roman wind. The first thing you smell is smoke. Faint, sharp, and wrong. It curls beneath the door to the scriptorium long before the alarm is raised. You are sorting scrolls from Alexandria when the acrid bite of burning papyrus reaches your nose. Then comes shouting. "Fire!" The word cuts through marble and air like a blade. You drop the scrolls and sprint down the corridor. Scribes are already scrambling with buckets, their sandals slapping against wet stone. The fire has started near the East Annex, one of the smaller storerooms where candles were sometimes left unattended. Always a candle, always an accident, always the same story. By the time you reach it, the air is thick with heat and smoke. Flavia is already there, her hair plastered to her forehead, hauling water from a cistern. "It's spreading fast," she shouts. You cover your mouth with your sleeve and rush to help. The flames lick up the wooden racks, hungry and quick, their orange glow reflected in every polished surface. The scrolls pop and curl like brittle leaves. You fling bucket after bucket, but it's like trying to reason with a volcano. Historians still argue whether Roman libraries were designed for fire prevention or merely for aesthetic tragedy. You are starting to think it's the latter. At some point, Tullius staggers in, coughing and wheezing, shouting orders no one hears. You can barely see him through the smoke. Then, through the haze, your eyes find the one thing that makes your blood run cold, the statue of Minerva, haloed in firelight, and the secret panel in her base glowing faintly from within. The hidden scrolls. You shove past a scribe, heart pounding. Flavia grabs your arm. "What are you doing?" "They are in there," you cough. "The scrolls, we'll lose them." "Forget them," she yells. "You'll die." But you've already pulled free. You reach the statue just as the ceiling above it groans ominously. Heat beats against your skin like an open hand. You drop to your knees, groping for the panel. The stone is scorching, but you manage to pry it open. Inside, thank the gods, the scrolls are intact, though the parchment edges have begun to brown. You grab them, shove them into your tunic, and turn just as part of the ceiling collapses. Flavia screams your name. For a moment, the world is nothing but light and sound and falling dust. Then, darkness. When you wake, you're lying on the cold marble floor, soaked to the bone. Rain pours through a hole in the roof where the fire has been beaten back. The Athenaeum is half drowned, half scorched, and eerily quiet. The smoke lingers, thick and sweet. Flavia kneels beside you, shaking your shoulder. "You're insane," she says hoarsely, "but alive." You cough, managing a rasp laugh. "I'll take insane over incinerated." She helps you sit up. Around you, the devastation is total. Blackened beams, scrolls reduced to ash, the faint hiss of dying embers. Tullius is alive too, though coughing blood and muttering prayers to Jupiter Optimus Maximus. The younger scribes sit in stunned silence, clutching charred fragments like mourners at a funeral. You glance down. The rescued scrolls are still in your tunic, slightly singed but whole. You unwrap them carefully, hands trembling. The moon-marked seals are unbroken, the ink inside unspoiled. Flavia stares at them, then at you. "All that," she says softly, "for a few pieces of parchment." You meet her gaze. Not parchment. Memory. Outside, dawn struggles through the smoke. The rain keeps falling, steady, relentless, purifying. The city stirs faintly beyond the ruins, unaware that a fragment of its history nearly vanished overnight. By mid-morning, the fire's officially out. The prefect arrives, muttering about insurance and imperial property. He clucks at the damage but seems relieved that the main hall still stands. "We'll rebuild," he says with bureaucratic certainty. "Rome always rebuilds." But you're not sure it's true. Later, when the others leave to rest or report, you stay behind. The Athenaeum silence feels deeper now, less peaceful and more funereal. You wander among the ashes, fingers tracing charred marble, and you can't help but think of all the knowledge lost. Recipes, philosophies, plays, private letters, entire lives compressed into smoke. You remember an old Stoic line: "Everything beautiful perishes, but not everything that perishes was beautiful." You can't remember who said it. Maybe no one. Maybe the library itself. You find a spot near the window, the only corner untouched by flame. There, you spread out the rescued scrolls on a table, laying them flat to dry. The faint crescent symbols shimmer weakly in the grey light. Flavia joins you silently. For a while, neither of you speaks. Then she says, "Do you ever think we are the only ones who care?" You shrug. Probably. But that's what makes us librarians, not senators. She huffs a tired laugh. "Remind me never to work with you again." You smile. "Noted. Same time tomorrow." A pause. Then, quietly, she adds, "You know, historians still argue whether the great library of Alexandria truly burned or just faded away. Maybe they'll say the same about us." You look around the ruined hall, the shattered columns and blackened mosaics. "Let them argue," you whisper, "as long as they remember to ask." That night, as you lock the Athenaeum's gates, you turn back for one last look. The rain glimmers against the marble. Through the open roof, you glimpse the moon, a waning crescent, like the one marked on your palm. And for the first time in days, you feel something shift inside you. Not fear, not triumph, just quiet certainty. The scrolls may burn. The walls may crumble. But as long as someone remembers, the words aren't dead. They're just waiting. Morning sunlight slides through the broken roof of the Athenaeum, painting slow-moving gold across the ruined marble. You wake in your narrow cot behind the stacks, your joints aching, your tunic stiff with smoke. Outside, Rome hums faintly, vendors calling, carts creaking, pigeons gossiping like nothing ever burned. And now, as the last embers of the day fade into the cool hush of night, let everything in your body slow down. The ruins of the Athenaeum blur and soften, the marble cooling under your palms, the scent of ash dissolving into rain. You can almost hear the faint rhythm of dripping water echoing between columns, steady as a heartbeat. Your breathing matches that rhythm. Inhale, exhale, each breath quieter than the last. You imagine the scrolls drying in the candlelight, the ink safe, the words at rest. Somewhere above, the moon glides behind a gauze of clouds, pale and eternal. The world of the librarian fades into silence, but the calm remains. You picture yourself walking slowly down the marble hall one last time, fingertips brushing the shelves that still stand. Every step feels lighter, slower, softer. The air grows cooler, the sounds dimmer, until all that's left is stillness. Even the city beyond the walls seems to sleep, Rome itself breathing gently beneath the stars. The fires are gone now. The chaos has passed. What remains is peace, quiet, and the soft memory of all that was once known and written and loved. Let your thoughts drift, like dust motes in that ancient light. You've done enough tonight, coppered enough, saved enough, remembered enough. You are safe. The story is safe. And as you rest now, the world continues its quiet work of remembering, line by line, whisper by whisper. Good night, librarian. Sleep well. You rise, stretch, and step carefully through the charred halls. The fire has left a scent you'll never quite forget, bitter, like regret baked into stone. But somehow, amid all the ruin, the Athenaeum still stands. Half its heart is gone, yet it breathes. And so do you. Tullius meets you by the fountain, wrapped in a soot-stained cloak. "We'll need new catalogues," he croaks. "And new shelves. And new scribes," you add softly, remembering the two who didn't make it out. He nods. "Rome will send replacements. They always do." But you both know replacements can't restore what's been lost. You spend the day salvaging what survived: the rescued scrolls, a few wax tablets, even a cracked stylus that once belonged to a poet you admired. The sun is bright, almost cruel in its normalcy. Every movement raises dust and memory. By midday, a delegation arrives from the Senate. They're draped in white and gold, faces polished and bored. The leader, a man with teeth too perfect for honesty, surveys the damage and says, "A tragedy, truly. But the Emperor values resilience. You'll resume copying immediately." You nearly laugh. Immediately. As if knowledge could be rebuilt like scaffolding. But you nod, because that's what librarians do. We nod, we endure, we copy. Flavia appears beside you, ink already staining her fingers again. "Back to work," she murmurs, her tone caught between bitterness and affection. You grin. Can't keep Rome waiting. And so the rhythm resumes. The scratching of quills returns, softer but defiant. The Athenaeum feels like a wounded creature relearning how to breathe. As the afternoon drifts by, you find yourself drawn again to the secret scrolls, the ones you saved from the fire. You unroll one carefully, half expecting it to crumble. But it doesn't. The ink glimmers faintly, the script so delicate it could vanish if you blinked too hard. You read the first line aloud. When the moon is clearest, so too is memory. No author, no date, just the mark of the crescent and a feeling, like someone centuries ago reached forward through time, leaving a whisper only you could hear. Historians still argue whether knowledge is meant to be preserved or simply relived. You think maybe both. That's the quiet magic of your work. Not glory, not fame, just the slow translation of human thought into something almost eternal. As evening comes, you walk the perimeter of the Athenaeum, noting what can be saved. A cracked pillar here, a half-melted bronze bust there. You touch each in turn, as if taking attendance. The city's lamps flicker to life beyond the colonnades. Somewhere, musicians are tuning their lyres. The air smells faintly of bread and rain. Rome continues, indifferent, alive. You pause at the doorway, gazing up at the sky. The moon hangs there again, thin and sharp, like the scar still healing on your hand. You lift your palm toward it, wondering whether the mark and the symbol were ever coincidence. Behind you, Flavia calls out, "Don't stay too late." You smile without turning. "When do I ever?" Her laughter echoes off the marble, fading into the night. You sit alone on the library steps, listening to the steady rhythm of the Tiber, the murmur of passers-by, the soft creak of the building settling back into its bones. You think about all the librarians who came before you, those who copied, who translated, who whispered prayers over fading ink. People like you, unnoticed, uncelebrated, indispensable. And you realize something simple, something so obvious it feels profound. You were never guarding books. You were guarding voices. The wind sighs through the colonnade, carrying a faint scent of parchment and oil. You breathe deeply, close your eyes, and for the first time in weeks, let your body relax completely. The Athenaeum hums around you, a heartbeat of knowledge, quiet but unwavering. The night deepens, and your thoughts slow, soft as ash settling after rain. The words on the hidden scroll echo faintly in your mind. When the moon is clearest, so too is memory. You smile to yourself. Maybe that's true. You've given your life to remembering. Now, at last, you can rest in the knowing.